All right, you've got to stop staring at that blinking cursor. Seriously. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are going to permanently cure your writer's block. Because let's be honest, if you've ever felt totally paralyzed by a looming deadline, you're definitely not alone. But today, I'm handing you an evidence-first blueprint that literally transforms the absolute nightmare of writing a paper from scratch into something as simple and honestly as satisfying as snapping together a Lego set. We're going to dive right into exactly how you can build these airtight arguments that basically leave your professor with absolutely no choice but to give you an A. Let's get into it.
So, picture this. We've got two students facing the exact same prompt and the exact same deadline. Student A, they are trapped in this awful, toxic loop, chugging late-night coffee, drowning in stress, and just staring at a blank page until their brain is completely fried. But then you look at student B. They're working with this calm, collected focus, knocking out an A-plus essay in half the time, and they don't even look stressed. Now, the difference here, it is not a higher IQ. It's not some magical natural writing talent, and it is definitely not just working harder. It all comes down to a very specific system. Now, real quick, before we break down exactly what student B is actually doing, do me a huge favor. Jump into the comments and tell me your current grade. Whether you're sitting at a C, a B, or hey, even if you're failing right now, just throw it down there so we can track your glow up together as you start using this.
Okay, let's dive into this. The system we're unpacking today is called the Ghostwriter method. Because here's the reality check. Most students, they actually have a strategy problem, not a writing problem. They just try to force out an entire essay using sheer brute force willpower. And that's exhausting. But this method, this is a strategic, step-by-step blueprint designed to literally turn your brain into a performance machine. When you follow these steps, you are effectively setting up a system that ghostwrites your papers for you. You don't need to rely on willpower anymore, because the system does all the heavy lifting.
So let's kick things off with step 1, the empty cup mindset.
Listen, before we even think about touching a keyboard, we've got to talk about mental prep. If you've ever sat at your desk just totally paralyzed because you're desperately trying to find that perfect first sentence, yeah, you're suffering from perfectionism-induced burnout. And that brings us to this really brilliant foundational concept from Zen Buddhism. You cannot pour tea into a cup that is already full. It is the perfect metaphor for drafting. Think about it. You literally cannot write a great essay if your mind is already stuffed to the brim with your own ego, your fear of failure, or this paralyzing need for the first draft to be completely flawless. That perfectionism is exactly the heavy baggage that drags you straight into procrastination. You have to consciously hit pause and empty your cup. And how exactly do we empty that cup? By replacing all that chaotic, swirling anxiety with one singular focus statement. So don't sit down and vaguely say something like, I'm going to work on my history paper. No way. That is way too broad, and it basically just invites distraction. Instead, you need to say something super specific, something like, I will master the logic of the French Revolution's causes and structure it into 3 clear arguments. See the difference? Setting a concrete focus statement like that acts as a mental filter. It shuts out all the extra noise, and it actively commits your brain to finishing a specific task, rather than just kind of vaguely starting one. Moving right along to step 2, the chain learning foundation. Now, what's really interesting about this research phase is that we can actually look to the study habits of elite students in China. It takes a total shift in perspective. See, most students treat their essay like a grocery list, right? Just a bunch of separate, isolated facts. But elite learners, they treat their essay like this highly connected web, where every single argument naturally reinforces the next one. You have got to start thinking like a scientist looking for patterns, rather than just acting like a passive recorder mindlessly copying down quotes. You are hunting for what we call the red threads, those underlying themes and logical connections that string all your research points together. Because when you find those red threads, your memory of the material becomes incredibly sticky, and the actual depth of your writing, it improves exponentially.
All right, here we go. Step 3, the 5 by writing rule.
Let me tell you, this rule is genuinely the secret sauce of the whole method. It's heavily utilized in Japanese topper schools. But before we look at the rule itself, we really need to understand the concept of active retrieval. There's this massive myth out there that you're supposed to just sort of think your way through an essay while staring blankly at your monitor. But that's passive, and honestly, it just doesn't work. Active retrieval is all about engaging completely different parts of your brain by drafting your main arguments strictly from memory first. It's about literally building a robust neural network right around your essay's core concepts. Your brain actually masters logic through motion and action, not by just passively pondering. Okay, so here is exactly how you apply this 5x writing rule before you ever type your official first draft. You take your main thesis, and you're going to write it out in 5 entirely different ways. First up, just write it as a basic, straightforward definition. Second, write a completely reworded version of that definition just to test your vocabulary. Third, and this is fun, draw it out as a visual diagram or a flowchart. Fourth, explain that thesis using a cool story or a metaphor. And finally, fifth, write it out exactly the way you would speak it out loud to a friend, preferably a friend who owes you a favor, right? But seriously, by the time you actually hit step 5, you haven't just thought about your essay, you have comprehensively mapped the whole thing out. So when you finally do sit down to type the actual paper, the essay practically writes itself. It's amazing.
Next up, step 4, full sniper mode. Okay, so you've got your foundation built. Now it is time to execute, and you need strict discipline for this. These are your absolute non-negotiable logistics. First, your phone doesn't just go on silent, it goes straight onto airplane mode. You are officially off the grid. You need one uncluttered table, one singular goal, and absolute unbroken silence. Let me be super clear about this. 1 single hour of this kind of intense black hole focus is infinitely more powerful and way more productive than 3 hours of mindless multitasking with TikTok secretly open in another tab. And to pace this sniper mode, we're going to use a seriously upgraded version of the Pomodoro ritual. And it all starts with the number 25. That's 25 minutes of deep, intense, completely unbroken flow state. During this time, your fingers literally do not stop typing, and you do not look away from that screen. You are just in it. And then that intense sprint is immediately followed by the number 5. This is a vital, non-negotiable 5-minute break. And no, that does not mean opening up a new tab to endlessly scroll through social media. Actually, step away from the screen. Take a breath, go get some water, and let your brain completely reset. Remember, human brains are biologically hardwired to work in short, intense sprints, not these endless, exhausting marathons. You've got to respect that 5-minute reset.
Which brings us to our final phase, step 5, the sensei teach back. So your draft is officially done. Awesome. But this right here, this is the pivotal move that elevates it from a decent paper to an airtight A+. Before you even think about hitting that submit button, you must explain your entire essay out loud in exactly 10 seconds as if you're teaching the core concept to a 10-year-old. I know, it sounds super simple, but it is brutally effective. If you can't explain your core argument simply and quickly, it means you don't actually understand it well enough yet. And trust me, your writing is definitely going to reflect that confusion. So the crucial point is that this 10-second exercise acts as your ultimate audit. It actively forces your brain to rapidly reorganize all those complex concepts into easily digestible pieces. It instantly exposes any clumsy phrasing or any weird gaps in your logic. And most importantly, it lets you fix those glaring errors right now, well before your professor ever gets the chance to spot them with a red pen in hand. At the end of the day, you really don't need to be some born genius to write incredible essays. You just need the right system. It is officially time to stop trying to just outgrind everybody else and start working much, much smarter. So if you're ready to finally make the switch and become an absolutely unstoppable student, put the Ghostwriter method to the test on your very next assignment. I'd love to know, what is your biggest writing struggle right now? Drop it in the comments below. And hey, if you want to unlock more of these highly effective study secrets, make sure to hit subscribe. That blank page, it is no longer your enemy. It's just an empty space waiting for your system to take over. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep staring at the blinking cursor? Or will you empty your cup,